Immigrants also create a lot for this country. I mean, immigrants are net taxpayers. For a personal anecdote, my grandpa moved here from Syria in the late 90s, and you could argue, yeah, he was taking up space. Why was this person from Syria taking up space in the United States? We shouldn't have let him here. But my grandpa has built a business that now employs dozens of people, that feeds dozens of families. I grew up in Indiana, where my community was full of a lot of Muslims who became heart doctors or surgeons or very productive members of society. 30% of working physicians in this country are immigrants, are people who are coming here to help Americans. That is putting America first. How are physicians that are immigrants helping Americans not putting America first?
Hold on, don't take that. I'm going to ask a question. What I would like you to respond to is there a positive...
Something pretty revealing just happened on PBS, and it perfectly captures the political battle happening in America right now. Progressive commentator Adam Mockler sat down for a debate with Natalie, a well-known MAGA media figure closely tied to the far-right political ecosystem. The topic? Immigration, one of the most emotionally charged and politically explosive issues in the country today. And what unfolded in this exchange wasn't just a simple disagreement over policy. It quickly turned into something much bigger, a clash between two completely different visions of America. One side arguing that immigration has long been part of the country's strength and identity, and the other framing immigration as a threat to the nation's future. This wasn't a quiet, polite policy discussion. It was a tense back and forth filled with sharp arguments, competing narratives, and some claims that deserve a much closer look. So in this video, we're going to break down the most important moments from this debate between Adam Mockler and Natalie, examine what was actually said, and unpack the political messaging behind it. Because once you listen carefully, a lot of the arguments being made here start to reveal a much bigger story. Like the video and subscribe right now. I've got some strong thoughts on this exchange. Let's take a closer look at this clip.
In November, President Trump had a really public falling out with Marjorie Taylor Greene, who criticized President Trump over his handling of the Epstein files, foreign interventions, failing to extend the Affordable Care Act subsidies. And ultimately, she said, you know, I am America first, not MAGA. She feels, perhaps like you do or not, she feels that the Trump administration has abandoned some of its America first policies. Is she right?
I think it's too soon to tell. And I think that to answer that question definitively now is to imply that politics is stagnant and it can't be in flux. Like, there are issues where...
But is she onto something? I mean, it does sound like you agree that
and for people who watch War Room, but I think where people maybe misunderstand and where maybe I would humbly and respectfully push back with what Marjorie Taylor Greene is saying is that I think to just capitulate and say it's over is to give up when the Trump administration has shown that they are receptive to the sort of grassroots, their base, calling them out. And I think that people who just want to throw in the towel, that's not the American fighting spirit. I don't think that that's what composes the people who make up the War Room audience. They're willing to make phone calls. They're willing to get involved.
I think when you say you're putting America first, what I'm actually hearing is you're trying to pull the Republican Party in a more radical direction. Putting America first is allowing...
You can call it radical. She would call it populist.
Well, populist, but not populist.
I care about borders.
Well, the majority of Americans think that legal immigration is something that is okay because it benefits the United States. Republicans view immigrants in a fundamentally different way than they view everybody else. You guys view immigrants as net drains on the society, but that is not borne out. You can look at anybody as a drain on the society. I take up housing, you take up electricity, you take up space on the road. So when you say that immigrants take up housing and immigrants take up electricity, it's sort of a myopic view, and they take up jobs because they create. Immigrants also create a lot for this country. I mean, immigrants are net taxpayers. For a personal anecdote, my grandpa moved here from Syria in the late 90s, and you could argue, yeah, he was taking up space. Why was this person from Syria taking up space in the United States? We shouldn't have let him here. But my grandpa has built a business that now employs dozens of people, that feeds dozens of families. I grew up in Indiana, where my community was full of a lot of Muslims who became heart doctors or surgeons or very productive members of society. 30% of working physicians in this country are immigrants, are people who are coming here to help Americans. That is putting America first. How are physicians that are immigrants helping Americans not putting America first?
Hold on, don't take that. I'm going to ask a question. What I would like you to respond to is there a positive story about immigrants who aspire to live the American dream, that are living it in a way that isn't undermining the American experience for Americans already here? Is that, I mean, do you subscribe to that notion in any way? Or do you reject it?
Of course there are some, but the way that you're seeing legal immigration happen now is just historically, empirically extremely different from the waves that you saw before. You used to have an on period of people coming in and an off period, and the people who would come in would assimilate. much like your grandfather. They would actually, I think, enjoy American culture because you had to. Now, I think you have this sort of weird, perverse left-wing ideology where we're told that assimilation is racist, and I don't think that that works. And I think when you talk about the immigration issue, it's like we have to do this performative, to some extent, ritual where we have to praise immigrants as like the greatest thing that has ever happened to this country. I'm not bashing or negging all immigrants, but I also think we can appreciate the contributions that Americans have made to this country. The American people have been abused by the legal immigration system. And sure, are there some immigrants that are good? Yes, but there's also a lot of problems with our immigration system. It's a problem of scale. It's too many people.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to show you guys a clip of William F. Buckley Jr. Have you ever heard of him?
Yeah.
Okay, so William F. Buckley Jr. hosted a program called Firing Line for 33 years. In 1979, he actually tackled the question of immigration. How many people should be allowed in and from where? Listen to what he says in this exchange with the first Latino commissioner of the Immigration and Naturalization Service. Take a look.
Well, is the question purely a numerical question, or is it one that has also to do with ethnic balance?
I think it has to do with the whole vision of the country.
If my memory is correct, it was only about 13 or 14 years ago that we officially renounced the preference that had previously been written into the law for two groups. Number one, Western Europeans. Number two, residents of this hemisphere. Is that correct?
Yeah, we've gradually moved toward a non-racial type policy.
Okay, so he's saying we have gradually in our immigration policy moved towards a non-racial policy. There is a sense that sort of implicitly we are moving towards a racial policy for immigration under this administration. The criticism is that the Trump administration wants a whiter America. Is that fair?
I think that's absolutely absurd. The idea of populism, economic nationalism, is maximizing the value of what it means to be an American citizen. I don't care what race you are. I don't care what your religion is. I don't care what your ethnicity is. I don't care about any of that. I care that first and foremost, you are an American citizen. The American people, my war room audience, they don't care about immigration because of race. They care about it because of American identity, of which we are all Americans, I assume, in here. And that the idea that our government should not be making our lives more difficult.
Adam, do you want to?
I disagree entirely. This administration is absolutely looking at immigration through a racial lens. You can look at the temporary protected status they have removed from many groups, all minority groups. You can look at the refugee status they are allowing from South Africa. They are banning countries from coming in, or people from countries that are black or that look a certain way, but white refugees are the only ones that are being allowed to come in. Stephen Miller's guidance of this immigration policy is absolutely racial.
Let's pause for a second, because this is where the conversation gets very revealing. Adam Mockler pushes back on the idea that immigration policy today has nothing to do with race. And frankly, that pushback makes a lot of sense when you look at the broader political context. The claim we often hear from MAGA commentators is simple. This isn't about race, it's just about protecting America. But when you start examining the policies, the rhetoric, and the examples being used, that explanation begins to fall apart pretty quickly. Think about it. When Donald Trump first entered politics, one of the most infamous moments of his campaign involved comments about immigrants coming from certain countries. And it's worth remembering, he wasn't talking about places like Sweden or Norway. The countries being singled out were very different. That history is part of why many critics remain skeptical when they hear the argument that race plays no role in the conversation. And then there are the policy decisions themselves. For example, critics have pointed out that this administration has shown openness to granting protections to certain groups of white South African refugees, while simultaneously tightening restrictions on many other groups seeking asylum. Whether supporters agree with that characterization or not, it's exactly the kind of policy contrast that fuels the perception that immigration priorities may not be applied evenly. Natalie Winters also tries to frame the issue by saying that critics treat immigrants as if they're the greatest thing that's ever happened to America. But that framing ignores a much more complicated historical reality. The United States is, fundamentally, a nation shaped by waves of immigration, and almost every one of those waves faced backlash when they first arrived. Take Irish immigrants in the 19th century. At the time, they were widely discriminated against and often portrayed as outsiders who didn't belong. The same was true for Italian immigrants. Today, most Americans simply see Irish and Italian heritage as part of the mainstream American story. But historically, those groups were often treated as if they were fundamentally different from the rest of the population. In other words, the pattern isn't new. Throughout American history, new immigrant groups have frequently been portrayed as threats before eventually becoming part of the national fabric. That's why critics argue that the real issue isn't simply immigration policy. It's the way certain groups are framed as others. When political rhetoric consistently paints some immigrants as dangerous, suspicious, or fundamentally incompatible with American identity, people start asking an obvious question: why those groups specifically? And that's ultimately the heart of the disagreement in this debate. Adam Mockler is arguing that race and identity absolutely shape the way immigration is being discussed today. Natalie Winters insists that the issue is purely about protecting American interests. But when you look at the history, the rhetoric, and the policies themselves, it's easy to see why many observers find Mockler's argument far more convincing.
Olivia Anstadt, freshman political science major. So what's your question?
Thank you for having me. So I think we can all agree that social media is inherently biased towards extremists and very controversial people, seeing as their content invokes emotion and therefore they attract a much larger audience. And that being said, how do we now as a society recenter our popular media around truth, diversity, and good intent in this age that is so fueled by bias and prejudice?
That's a really good question.
Take it.
I don't have the exact answer. I mean, that's a really good question, but I know exactly what you were talking about. The algorithms currently incentivize and promote the most outrageous content. I think this gives us a warped perception of each other, and I think it quite frankly allows extremists to control the media message, and it elects extremists. We are currently living in an environment where the social media incentivization of radicalization is beginning to translate into our electeds being more radical because they're using social media, therefore they're giving more and more radical takes, and they're elected.
What do you think about the algorithms and their ability to potentially throttle or incentivize certain actors?
Well, I think you got to differentiate it between Elon purchasing Twitter and post.
Definitely.
And I think that a lot of this stuff started in 2017 after President Trump won, where you saw a lot of the elites, Republican and Democrat, it's no secret that the Republican establishment did not want him to win, I think start to be very fearful of free speech on the internet. And after that, that was the advent of what we call the censorship industrial complex, where you saw the propping up, almost overnight, of this whole entire grant-making industry to universities, to NGOs, to the sort of idea of media literacy, where they were funding studies not just to censor misinformation, but these very radical ideas of pre-bunking and debunking misinformation around topics that we all in this room would not agree on are actually misinformation. And that stuff was leveraged to, censor the sitting president of the United States and rip him off of every social media network ever, even probably Uber Eats. So that was the culmination.
Didn't work, did it though?
Well, but this is the point, because the censorship is not actually of falsehoods. It's censorship of ideas that threaten the power of the current ruling elite, the regime. Whether or not they think their ideas are true or not, it doesn't matter. They use censorship as a tool of political power.
All right, we need to stop right here for a moment, because what Natalie Winters is arguing in this part of the discussion is honestly one of the strangest narratives still circulating in American politics today. She's talking about the ruling elites, suggesting that people like Donald Trump are somehow outsiders battling against a powerful system that's trying to silence them. But think about that claim for just a second. Donald Trump isn't an outsider. He isn't some scrappy political rebel fighting from the margins. He is the President of the United States, arguably the most powerful political position on the planet. His party controls major levers of government. His allies dominate huge sections of media. And his influence over the Republican Party is stronger than almost any modern political figure. So the idea that Trump is still some kind of persecuted outsider battling the elites doesn't really hold up when you look at reality. And then there's the claim that Trump has been censored or silenced. That's another talking point you hear constantly in MAGA media circles. But again, take a step back and look at the bigger picture. Donald Trump might be one of the most talked about political figures in modern history. His speeches, his posts, his interviews, his rallies, they are broadcast, debated, analyzed, and repeated across television, radio, podcasts, social media, and news platforms almost nonstop. His words dominate the political conversation on a near daily basis. That doesn't exactly look like someone whose voice has been erased. What critics often point out instead is that many of the controversies surrounding Trump come from the statements themselves. Over the years, he has repeated claims and stories that have been widely challenged or debunked, and when those claims spread widely online, they naturally generate pushback. And that's where the debate over censorship becomes complicated. Is criticism or fact-checking the same thing as silencing someone? Or is it simply part of the normal process of public debate when powerful political figures make controversial claims? That's the underlying question running through this entire exchange. Natalie Winters argues that Trump and his allies are victims of a system trying to suppress their message. Adam Mockler, on the other hand, argues that what we're really seeing is a political movement that spreads controversial claims and then labels the backlash as censorship. Two completely different interpretations of the same political moment. But now I want to hear from you. After watching this exchange and hearing both sides of the argument, where do you land? Do you think the concerns about censorship are legitimate? Or do you think this is simply the normal pushback that comes with modern political discourse? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and let's talk about it.